over $24,000. The fine was a result of the NFL's rule against sexually suggestive behavior on the field. Josh Norman also fined. A 15-yard penalty, apparently not enough for his bow and arrow display. He was fined $10,000 Wednesday for a violent celebration. Max, I want to start with you. Do you have a problem with this?
I think the bow and arrow is silly. I mean, I don't think it was meant as a violent situation. But, you know, I don't have a problem with fining a player, including Antonio Brown, for twerking or doing whatever you want to call it.
Popping it.
You know, I mean, it is sexually suggestive and lewd, and if you're packaging family entertainment, I get it. Fine him, fine. Here's what I have a problem with. How does what a guy does, how he behaves after the fact, the play on the field is over, affect things like field position? That is absurd. It's one thing to enforce a code of behavior because you want a family product. Very violent product, by the way, but and they sell alcohol during the commercials. But okay, fine, it's for kids, right? Fine. It's one thing to say, we're going to fine you if you behave that way. That's okay. But to say that somehow, to insist that that behavior is somehow conflated with the actual competition on the field is asinine. I've never understood it, and I'm totally against it. So forget the fine. I'm upset by the fact that it cost you field position because you celebrated.
Stephen A?
Go ahead, Will. Go ahead, Will.
Well, I guess I disagree with Max. I don't have a problem with the punishment for the act. I have a problem with the application of the rule, which I can't parse. I can't figure out. It's like most things in the NFL these days. And to me, this is actually one of the biggest problems the NFL faces is we don't know what we're watching, apparently. We can't trust our eyes. We can't see reality because there's this alternate reality, a shadow reality that is the NFL rulebook. And to know what a catch is, or a fumble, or who recovered a fumble, or what's too much celebration, you got to sort of consult the oracles. And they throw chicken bones and look into the instant replay booth, and they come out with some arbitrary decision that's never consistent. And that's a problem for the NFL because it convinces us that it allows us to consider that it's unfair, that it's rigged. It allows us to go, wait, why is that not a catch? It was a catch in the game last week. It was a catch earlier in the game. I don't understand what's going on here. That's the biggest problem. And so this arbitrary enforcement, because we don't know what's violent, what's sexually subjective, what the definition of a catch is, that's a real problem for the NFL. And honestly, I don't know how they nail it down. I mean, how do you technically nail down what's sexually suggestive?
Sexually suggestive. I do have to say.
Okay, but where's the line?
I think both of those were. I'm just saying.
You can't trust the eyes point really quickly is a very good point because I also have a beef there, but it's not so much in terms of the application of the rules. It's like your team scores, but am I allowed to be happy? Oh, they're reviewing the scoring play. I don't know. Did it count? Did it not count? You can't ever feel the emotion in the moment that you can be confident is a permanent emotion, that you're allowed to feel that way because they apply all these rules in ways that are like Byzantine and hard to understand.
Stephen A?
Y'all are making it more convoluted than it really needs to be. Fact of the matter is simple. NFL should have a rule instituted, nothing sexually suggestive. That's it, period. If it's not sexually suggestive, because obviously kids are watching, what's the problem? Why is Josh Norman being fined? I understand the Antonio Brown fine. Do I think it deserved to be for $25,000? No. But I understand the fine because you don't want something sexually suggestive. But how in God's name is Josh Norman getting a fine for that? For what?
It falls under violence.
Especially here is the hypocrisy in it all. Look at the Redskins. Look at, you got the whole Native American issue, which Max has spoken eloquently about on many, many occasions, okay? And, you think about the bow and arrow and all of this other stuff. He being a member of the Washington Redskins, that may very well have been the reason that he did it. I don't see them looking to change the name. I don't see them looking to do anything about that. Why would you sit up there and penalize him for something that harmless? And that's just one of the examples. There are many others where the NFL has definitely been a bit excessive. I mean, you're controlling the shoes folks wear, the color socks they wear, and stuff like that. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. It doesn't stop, and that's why I applaud and completely appreciate Mike Tomlin and where he's coming from, where Mike Tomlin said we need you to be a bit more specific as to what warrants warrants a fine, as opposed to something being so arbitrary and being implemented, you know, on an arbitrary basis where you can't define exactly what the problem is until you are confronted by it. And if you got a problem with somebody, how about giving them a warning first and then make sure and see what happens thereafter,
So, Stephen
as opposed to just, you know, deciding to fine them.
You would pare down the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties in celebration to sexually suggestive. That's what you're saying. You'd allow the bow and arrow.
Yes.
You'd allow the flexing and all that.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, I would allow the flex. You don't want anything. You don't want it going on for a minute or two or something like that. But at the same time, if somebody's flexing or whatever, what's the problem?
No.
What about a guy
Especially in
slitting
a
his
sport like
throat, doing
football.
that kind of thing? That's okay?
Well, again, fine. Something sexually suggestive
Or violent.
Or violent.
That's
Okay,
a
but
bow
here's
and
the
arrow.
problem.
Fine.
So here's the
Bow and
problem.
arrow
I'm
can
with
hurt
Stephen
someone.
A. I'm with Stephen A. The way to fix your problems is to pare down your rule book. It's like the federal criminal code. Nobody can get their hands around it, and there's laws that contradict each other. They literally don't know how many things are against the law at the federal level at this point. We don't know what's going on in the NFL. However, paring it down doesn't solve all your problems because, as you point out, once you say violence is wrong in celebration, okay, throat slash bad, bow and arrow shooting good, where was the line there? I don't see what the bright line is. I agree, by the way. Josh Norman shouldn't be penalized. Carlos Hyde was penalized last night for flexing, literally doing sort of the Incredible Hulk flex. I mean,
I think there's an answer to your question, and it's nothing sexual at all. And in terms of the violence, because it's inextricably tied to a very violent sport, right? You got to do it on a case-by-case basis, and when they see something they don't like, they can say, okay, he did that. The next time someone does that, that's going to be a fine. I think people can be reasonable about what violent stuff constitutes what. And to Stephen A's point, I think that's the real reason. I don't think it's about the violence with the bow and arrow. I think that the Washington franchise is under some pressure about the name, and they felt that that hit a little too close to home.
No question, but the flexing should be allowed. And I don't need to see a man twerking, just throwing that
They
out there. I know.
never sacrifice
that's
field
your
position
team
because
secret.
they celebrated. That's absurd.
Jets fans cannot be happy with the performance of Ryan Fitzpatrick this season. He's already thrown 10 interceptions, 9 in just the last 2 games, resulting in the Jets having a 1-3 record, tied for worst in the AFC East. Fitzpatrick's poor performance is leading many to question if Geno Smith, who hasn't started since 2014, should be given the job back. Hello, Mark Schlereth.
Hello, how are you?
you doing?
I'm good.
What do you think? Fitzy's job on the line?
Well, I think your job is always on the line when you don't play well. I mean, obviously, I would look at the Jets as an organization and go, if Geno Smith can't get into a game after Fitzpatrick has thrown 9 picks in the last 2, how much do you hate Geno Smith? I mean, why is he on your roster? If you can't put him in, if you can't say, hey, Fitzpatrick, listen, man, it's not going your way today. You've thrown 5 picks. You know what? Why don't you come over here, sit on the sideline a little bit? Let's let Geno go ahead and fish this game up. If you can't even make that move at that point, then why is he on your roster? And, oh, by the way, Bryce Petty is hurt. You draft Christian Hackenberg. Have you not developed a quarterback that you feel consistent about or that you feel good enough about to put in a game when your starter is really struggling? I'm not just saying bench him. I'm saying pull him and say, man, listen, man, tough day. Didn't go your way today. But they don't even have the faith in Geno to do that. It really shows you from a personnel department what they're giving Todd Bowles, the head coach, to work with if they don't feel comfortable putting Geno Smith in a game in the last 2 weeks. So my question again would be, why is he on your roster? If you can't stand him that much, why is he even on your roster?
100%. And by the way, Geno Smith didn't get a long-term deal. First, he didn't get the money he wanted, then he didn't get the years he wanted, and there's a reason for that. It's because he hasn't been a very good quarterback throughout his career. He's a competent NFL quarterback, a very good backup, and as a starter, you're probably looking for someone a little bit better. If, you know, he doesn't look like a long-term, never been a long-term answer to anyone's franchise. He's turnover prone, obviously. 9 interceptions in like a half a second. Yeah, the other guy should be starting. And the thing is, since you don't have long-term plans for Fitzpatrick, since if you lose this week, you're probably not going to make the playoffs, and since at least Geno Smith has shown flashes at times, why wouldn't you start him? It doesn't make any sense. I think absolutely Fitzpatrick's job should be on the line this weekend.
It makes perfect sense why you wouldn't start Geno Smith. Geno Smith is 11-18 as a starter in New York. His QBRs in the 2 seasons that he played was 38 and 44. Enough said. New York doesn't believe in them. New Yorkers don't want them. Plus, you went out and you drafted, you drafted Bryce Petty. You drafted this guy Hackenberg out of Penn State. And so the fact of the matter is you've got 3 quarterbacks on your roster where none of them may work for you. I like McCagnon a lot. I'm really fond of him. But these are the kind of questions that have to be answered. Whether it's him, it's Bowles, or both. Something's wrong with that picture when you are looking at a Ryan Fitzpatrick. You got 3 other quarterbacks, and you ain't thinking about playing any of them. Now, in Ryan Fitzpatrick's defense, I will say this. You got the 6 interceptions against Kansas City. Deplorable performance, no doubt about that. But those 3 interceptions he threw last week, I thought were a relative misnomer. One of those interceptions went right through the hands of his receiver. The other one was a desperation heave near the end of the game. So to me, those 2 don't really count. What we really come down to is that Ryan Fitzpatrick had a very, very bad game against Kansas City. I don't think we should be looking at him as his job security at all unless he comes out and stinks up the joint with another 4, 5, 6 interception performance. If barring something like that, I don't see that you have a better option in a Jets uniform at this particular moment in time.
Right, that's why his job's on the line. If he plays poorly, then he should be yanked.
Well, he should be, but if you don't...
But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, if you have no faith in the guys that you have on your roster, why are they on the roster? Here's the other thing, man, that doesn't get enough attention in this day and age of the National Football League, and this is a big issue. And this is where some franchises set themselves apart and other franchises continue to struggle along the way. It's not just drafting guys. The most important part is developing guys. And it's really hard to do nowadays because you don't get to practice anymore. You don't get the time. You don't get that. So you better have guys on your staff that know how to develop a player and get that player up to speed quickly without that practice time. And, you know, the franchises that are doing it right now, the Denver Broncos have done a great job. New England is always exceptional at this. They draft, but more importantly, they develop. You can't develop a quarterback that you feel comfortable with in 2 weeks when your quarterback has thrown 9 interceptions. You got issues.
And by the way, how do you develop a guy if he never gets out on the field? If he's why is he on your roster? That's the first part, right?
Right.
And secondly, he doesn't get any more experience. He's never on the field. Let's not pretend Geno Smith didn't also have some pretty good games in the NFL. He has.
Right.
And Ryan Fitzpatrick, Stephen A., has been good throughout his entire career for a grand total of 2 seasons. Not great, good for 2 years out of his whole career.
I would ask both of you this, and maybe
what are the good games you're talking about with Geno Smith?
You want me to tell you the dates off the top of my head? Geno Smith, the last time he actually started for the Jets, threw like 3 touchdowns.
Off the top of my head, I've seen him had good moments. It's rare in a day that I saw us on a Monday morning talking about, hey, Geno really looked good. He's had good moments, but a good game?
Yes.
Schlereth, you know better than me. You recall him having a good game?
Well, listen, I'm sure that he's probably had a decent game. I would never put him in the upper echelon of anything. Here's the one thing that would bother me, and it's bothered me, and you two would know better than I, because you probably heard more than I. But when your quarterback, who at the time was your starting quarterback, gets jacked in the jaw in the locker room in training camp, and I didn't hear one dude on that roster say, like, hey, man, that's a problem. Like, when I didn't hear one guy come to his defense, that says to me, you got a guy in your locker room that people don't respect. And those guys, you can't give an opportunity to start if nobody respects the guy. And I don't know, maybe they did come to his defense, but I didn't hear one guy basically complain about that.
One thing he is in the upper echelon of, Mark, is Jets quarterbacks. He's in the upper echelon of Jets quarterbacks. Geno Smith.
That pretty much says it all right there.
All right, Jets
I don't think so.
at Heinz Field this weekend. Hey.